Okay, welcome back to the Range-Minded Podcast. So the last episode, I did my best not to make any edits. I'll do my best to do the same thing here. We'll see. No guarantees. It might be a train wreck. But, you know, that's kind of what you pay for when you come to show up to one of these shows. Anyways, welcome back to the Range-Minded Podcast. My name is Steve Zimmerman, and on the podcast, we talk about as many Second Amendment related issues as possible, whether it be ownership or training, what the government's doing, or what other non-governmental things are trying to take place that interfere with your Second Amendment rights. All this stuff I think is important. And in this episode particularly, I want to talk about two things in particular. And then we got to find a way to tie these all together so they make a cohesive thought, as it slowly gels up in your brain. First of all, we're going to kind of dive into some really basic stuff. At least it's going to seem that way. We're going to talk about what a prohibited person is. And I know we've talked about this before, at least touched on this before. But I want to talk about how that fits in to the chaos that we've been seeing lately all over social media and the news after the Minnesota shooting with the lady that tried to run over the ICE agent. Yes, I think it was a clean shoot, but it's complicated, it's messy, and it's pissing a lot of people off. It's causing a lot of consternation. But I want to talk about prohibited persons and what they are, like what defines a prohibited person. And we want to talk about kind of how it fits into this group of protesters, which I think are turning into violent mobs. And that should make sense right off the bat. And then I want to talk about something that President Trump did on the 7th of January regarding the UN. And it's a good thing. And I want to talk a little bit about what we avoided or what we might see in the future. Because you never know. Like every time a presidency changes in the United States or the power swings from one side to the other, things get, it's a mess. It's a mess. It seems like the pendulum just keeps getting pushed farther and farther from one side to the other. It's asinine. Anyway, if you haven't yet, make sure you like, subscribe, share, all those things that you're supposed to do, blah, blah, blah. Whether it be on YouTube or Rumble, please like and follow the podcast there. Also, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts or Google Play, whatever they are. All the places that you find your podcasts. Spotify also has video, by the way, so that's kind of nifty. You can also find me on social media way too much if you talk to my wife and kids. Way too much. On X, it's at Range-Minded, but if you want to find me on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok even, I don't really spend a lot of time on TikTok anymore. Other than Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, it's at Range-Minded Podcast. X is the only one I couldn't get Range-Minded Podcast on there. I think it was too long of a username or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Nonetheless, find me there. Okay? Okay. Should we get going? Yes, we should. You guys have poop time to take care of. I'm assuming that some of you are watching while on the toilet. And thank you for sharing that intimate moment with me. That's pretty gross. All right, let's jump in to prohibited persons. Now, I know this seems super basic, and it may be something that just frustrates you, but let's just work with me here. Okay, so the ATF, if you've ever bought a gun from a dealer, you know that you've had to fill out a Form 4473. Now, that is the federal background check paperwork that every licensed firearm dealer is required to give the customer in order to transfer the firearm to them. It is required by federal law, which means it's a federal document, which means if you lie on this form, you could be in trouble as the person that's picking up the gun. Just pay attention to that. Now, by the way, I'm referring to my show notes, back to the computer screen for the show notes. Now, the prohibited person falls under 18 USC section 922. Okay. and that is enforced by the ATF. So what are these categories that the ATF says disqualifies a person from possessing a firearm? Okay, so here's the list. Felons. Pretty simple, right? A pretty obvious thing. Convicted of a crime punishable by more than 1 year. And it doesn't matter if it's violent or not. It could be white collar crime. If there was a conviction longer than 1 year, that would be considered a felon and a prohibited person in this definition that the ATF gives. Okay, fugitives with warrants should be pretty obvious, right? The next one in is and this is a sticky one for lawful gun owners out there right now, because there's a lot of confusion regarding this, and it's lawful or unlawful, I should say, unlawful drug users or addicts. Now, this is in controlled substances. This includes marijuana. I know that the feds just rescheduled weed, but this includes marijuana. So there's a little question mark there. Even if it's legal in your state, if you're an unlawful user of even marijuana, that makes you a prohibited person. Okay? Let's see. Mentally adjudicated. Like whether you've committed yourself or not, or somebody committed you to an institution, and the court has declared you mentally defective, that makes you a prohibited person. Okay? Again, that's whether you've involuntarily committed or not, if you've been adjudicated as mentally deficient or mentally ill, particularly by a court, you're a prohibited person. Dishonorable discharge from the military, that also makes you a prohibited person. Domestic violence abusers that have been convicted, right? This has to go through the court system, or you have some sort of restraining order. That makes you a prohibited person. Now that was a fairly recent change, and that could cause some issues down the line. You could see anybody could file a restraining order. I haven't heard of any cases of that happening, but doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Here's an important one, especially right now. Undocumented immigrants, someone who's renounced their citizenship, and there's a few other odds and ends things like that regarding citizenship status, would prohibit you from purchasing a firearm. Okay? Now, if you think about the United States in general, it's an estimated... now, I used Grok for this, so we'll see how that goes. Grok says it's estimated that 10 to 15% of American adults fall under one of those categories of prohibited person. That's a lot of people. Okay, so 10%, what is that, 30 million, roughly? So some of those could change because President Trump and the DOJ and Harmeet Dillon have really talked about specifically on the violent felons, or the felons that have even white-collar felons like we talked about at the very beginning there. If they've paid their debt to society, then they should be allowed to have their rights back, and I agree. So some of that could change, but let's just stay on the low end. Let's just say 10% of the adult American public could fall under the category of a prohibited person. Now, this the reason why I thought about this is because of what we're seeing all across the country right now after the ICE agent had to shoot that gal in the SUV. Okay? Now, let's just take out that circumstance. Let's not include, if we think outside the box and just look at the public at large, those who are really starting to demonstrate. Like, there was the one dude the same day that was somewhere in that neighborhood that talked about how I'd rather be smoking weed and blah, blah, blah. But now we got to take up arms, which immediately disqualifies this individual from possessing a firearm, which I thought was funny. And the news is blasting that out there that he's using drugs, but whatever. But there's a lot of folks, whether it be Antifa or the pro-Palestine groups or these folks that are like calling for straight up violence against, honestly, President Trump. Like, if you or I made some of the threats that are being posted on TikTok towards the president, we would damn sure have Secret Service knocking on our door. And I imagine the Secret Service is going to be knocking on their doors because it is extremely blatant and very open about violence against the president up to the point of assassination, which blows my mind that it's gone on this long. But there's also plenty of other folks that you've seen if you've spent any time on Twitter the last 24 hours, 48 hours. As of this show, I'm recording on the 12th of January. You would have seen many interviews and even some influencers, if that's what they feel like they need to be called, calling for violence, armed, protected under the 2A, violence against federal police officers. Now, if we use the statistic of 10% of the public, so about 30 million, that would be probably fall under the category of a prohibited person, how many of those prohibited persons are in that crowd? Now, I look at some of these people on like doing the stupid close-up, cry face, whiny, septum-piercing, ridiculous-looking videos. Yeah, I would say that they probably are mentally unstable. I would say many of them are probably on some kind of a controlled substance. And I would say all of them should be prohibited. But that's not up to me. Now, why am I pointing this out? Because I was thinking about this today after hearing the ridiculous amount of BS that's coming out of some of these people's mouths. They're all calling, like almost every one of those videos are calling for the purpose of the Second Amendment is to fight against tyranny. And this ICE problem that we're having right now is tyranny. They are straight up calling for violence against federal officers doing what I perceive as protected, lawful actions, finding folks that are milking the system and need to be deported. They're not just taking anybody off the streets. They're not executing people like some of these folks are like sharing ridiculous amounts of, they just shoot American people. They shoot you if you're white. They don't care. That's not happening. It's not happening. But what they're doing is they're stirring up the other parts of these gullible people that are probably prohibited or should be prohibited. And they're calling for violent action against these federal agents up to the President of the United States. Now, why do you think I'm bringing this up? Now, this isn't just to be hyperbolic about talking about these crazies that are calling for the violence. The reason why I bring this up is I think this has the potential of very negatively affecting the Second Amendment. Hear me out. We get a bunch of these crazies that even though maybe some of them are not prohibited persons, they pass a background check, they're eligible to keep and possess firearms, but then they go and commit heinous acts against law enforcement, against regular old Americans that support the Second Amendment or support Donald Trump at least, or, God forbid, they shoot the President of the United States. This has, in my thought process at least, does this have the potential of ruining the Second Amendment for the rest of us? And is this part of the play? You see, if all of a sudden there's more violence and there's more mass shootings and it's coming, even though it's coming from crazies, That's going to bump up the numbers. That's going to really start churning the moms demand action crowd and the anti-gunners and say, look at the violence, and this is protected under American Second Amendment. We need to change this because the proliferation of violence as they manipulate and abuse their right, thus screwing up the rights for law-abiding citizens. You see, in the past, we've seen how the anti-gun politicians have used smaller things, and I'm not saying that all mass shootings are small. That's not what I'm saying. But they would be relatively much smaller compared to what is being called for by these radicals. You see, these other actions have been used to fan the flames of destroying the Second Amendment. Yet here, if we see some of these larger actions that are being actively pushed by crazy leftists, by those who want communism and socialism brought into the United States, which would tear apart not a democracy, because we're not, but it's designed to attack the republic, which we are. This is my fear about these crazy leftists, that if they succeed in what a fraction of what they want to do against these federal agents, thus flaming even a larger scale operation, I mean, it could easily, and it will at some point, if it gets to that point, it will enact the Insurrection Act, which could at some point maybe even fall into martial law, which is a loss of everybody's rights. You see where I'm going with this? And maybe I'm a little crazy. Maybe I'm thinking a little too cuckoo crazy. But I'm worried that threat exists on the Second Amendment. And we have to get in front of this absolutely right now. I think, yes, I know I've said Donald Trump has been he's enacted more gun control actions under his authority, whether it was him or the DOJ or whatever. More negative actions towards the Second Amendment has come from under the leadership of Trump, and I stand by that statement. But two things can be true. A lot of very pro-Second Amendment things have happened under him as well. Now, I don't know how pro-2A he is. He holds those cards very close to his chest. Supposedly, his sons are very pro-2A. Supposedly. But the DOJ doesn't seem to be very active, and Congress, even though we have the Senate and the House, they're really not active, or at least proactive on protecting our rights. They're pretty passive, and they always have been. Republicans don't have the greatest track record. But that's now. What happens after the midterms if we lose one or both branches, or the other one of two, you know what I'm trying to say. What if we lose the House and the Senate? Then what? Then we see active pushes against those rights that could have been fixed under the big, beautiful bill. I better check my phone. I think it's going to ring here, and I don't have it on silent, and that would be embarrassing. There we go. I thought I felt it ringing, but then I remembered I had it still on loud mode. Anyway, tell me I'm wrong. At least let's do this thought exercise and think about the possibilities that could erupt from that. Okay? Let's jump to the next segment here. Let me scroll down. And let me get a drink real quick, if you don't mind. It's actually not ginger beer today. It's something else. Oh, yeah. Gotta wet the old vocalizer up a little bit. The longer I talk, the more gravelly my voice gets. And I don't know, maybe you think that gravelly voice is quite appealing. You probably should seek medical attention if that's the case. Now let's jump to something that Trump did that actually is pro-Second Amendment. It is definitely something I would consider a win for President Trump here. Now, to be fair, I know you don't know this, but I want to be straight up and honest with you guys. I already recorded this segment, but I decided to share something that apparently stopped the recording. So now I get to re-record this segment because I have no clue where it ended off. So let's take it from the top, shall we? Anyway, so January, I think I mentioned this a little bit before, maybe not, I can't remember now. But January 7th, Trump did something that's pretty amazing. But in order to understand how important and impactful this is, we need to go way back to 2013. All the way back to everybody's favorite half-white president. That's right, Barack Obama. Now, he was no savior to the Second Amendment, and many of us in the 2A space disliked him a lot, and not because of his ethnicity or any of that BS. It was because he hated your rights. He hated the Second Amendment. He was looking for every avenue possible to infringe and change your rights. Honestly, not just the Second Amendment. It seemed like there was a lot of things he hated about America, allegedly. But anyway, so in 2013, Obama signed this. It was called the UN Arms Trade Treaty. So I have to read it on my show notes because I'm a professional. Anyway, he signed it in 2013, but it never got ratified, thankfully. But what was this treaty? Okay, let's see. It regulated international conventional arms trade, including small arms, light weapons, ammunition, parts. It also had stipulations for parties. Yeah, stipulations for parties, national control systems for exports, imports, transit, and brokering. It prohibited transfers to those who are violating UN sanctions and embargoes and that kind of stuff. Obviously, those who might be committing genocide or in the middle of war or war crimes. There was also risk assessments for denying exports, for overriding risk to peace, human rights, terrorism, gender violence. And there's also something that was really problematic, which was annual reporting and transparency, that the UN really, really wanted that information. So you can see right off the bat that if that was ratified and if the United States jumped on that wagon, that it would dramatically influence and interfere with the 2A community, specifically manufacturers, and the sell and purchase between manufacturer to citizen. Though they said there was no registry component to it and everything was voluntary, you know that if there was a staunch Democrat president who hated firearms, there probably would be a database shared annually with the United Nations. Thus, they would know the amount of arms bought and sold, ammunition bought and sold, and things transferred. Obviously problematic. And again, it would all been recorded. So there would have been a registry. That is illegal for the United States to keep a registry. But because it's the UN, they have no bounds on what they would consider a registry. So there's a huge problem that could have been, that could have happened, right? So even though it claimed that there was no kind of domestic impact, there was still the voluntary information that was going to be given to the United Nations, thus really putting in our liberties into question. Again, the United Nations has no jurisdiction as far as our civil rights. Like, they should have no play. They don't have any skin in the game. But when it came to disarming us, maybe that could have been part of the problem. I still think that that there could have been a greater impact that could have followed along with that. Now, in 2019, if you remember, I covered this. I think I shared all of Trump's speech, actually, at the NRA convention in 2019. He spoke about this and how he would not sign any kind of foreign interference on our rights, our Second Amendment rights particularly. It was the NRA meeting, right? Because no foreign entities or governing bodies have any weight to the American citizen. So huge, right? It's a big deal. Obviously, it got a round of applause. In fact, I think he threw pins out in the audience. It was pretty funny. Now, let's jump to the 7th of this year. Trump signs a presidential memorandum that was through an executive order. Okay, and that executive order is 14199. And it withdrawing from 66 international bodies that were contrary to the U.S. interests, thankfully. That included the UN Small Arms registration, including the UN Register of Conventional Arms Act, which was all part of the voluntary reporting program that was way back in the day, all the way back to 91, actually. Trump said, no, we're not playing this stupid game. You're not going to infringe on the rights of Americans. Now, say what you will with President Trump. I know I've said a lot that a lot of anti-gun stuff has come through him. I get it, and I stand by that statement. But also a lot of pro-gun stuff has come through him as well. The problem is just Pam Bondi and honestly the FBI. They both suck. They suck. Well, I mean, I'm still out on Harmeet Dillon. I don't know yet, but her boss is awful, just awful. Let's see. No UN. This aligns with America First. Sorry, I'm visiting my show notes. Let's see. We don't need the UN involved in our Second Amendment rights. They don't need to be involved. Again, the UN has because they're outside the United States, you know that they would be creating some kind of registry that is available to all nations to know where the guns are, how much ammunition could be in the possession of citizens. That's none of their damn business, right? Talk about infringing. And again, President Obama was happy to make that happen. Like, he signed it. Luckily, it never got ratified, but he signed it. He was willing to give up your rights. And it seems like it doesn't matter what president, or at least what affiliation, they tend to not care about our rights so much. We'll see. It seems like this administration is somewhat lined up with our thought process as far as those who want to protect all of our rights, including the Second Amendment. We'll see. Do you want to see what was in that? Let's see. Let me find this again. What exactly was in that? All right. For some reason, when I recorded or switched to this window, my audio shut off. Must be something to do with my settings, obviously. So anyway, this is a link to one of the UN articles I found when I Googleized UN Small Arms Treaty, I think is what I put in there. And this article popped up from the UN talking about violent crime across the world when it comes to firearms or guns, scary guns. And you can see the ridiculous picture that they put on the top of their article of a bunch of probably non-functioning revolvers. Would they find them in the bottom of the ocean or something? Ridiculous. Anyways, this article cites, I think it was 1 million deaths per year across the world. And then it cited another number of 500,000 violent gun deaths in the world. So I don't know where they got the two different numbers. Maybe that million was in a different article. Definitely in this article, it cites 500,000. But instead of actually talking about like prosecuting the murderers. They just seems like they want to blame. They don't call out the United States directly, but it just seems like they like blaming the United States because of private gun ownership. There's a bunch of articles linked to this as well on the left side or right side, excuse me, of this page. You can see there's some articles linked. I read those two. Super boring. Of course, it's the UN, so it's gonna suck. And they point out a bunch of different stuff. It's just kind of ridiculous. One of those articles, I don't think it was this one, I think it was one of the other linked articles, actually points out Haiti, the gun crime in Haiti, which is prolific, and the amount of murders that happen there. And they say I can't remember how many millions of guns are in the island of Haiti, but they blame it on outside sources where these guns come from, because obviously Haiti doesn't have a gun manufacturer. But it doesn't directly say the United States. But I know in some stuff I read last year, it definitely implied that the other countries definitely implied the United States should take the blame, and it's our fault that Haiti has a gun crime problem. And instead of Haiti using their law and their judicial system, which maybe they don't have, instead of executing people that are murderers, it's the United States' fault that guns are prevalent there, when obviously we have nothing to do with it. It's the UN. Maybe you'd see as a crime-solving problem. Anyway, that's about it, what I have for you in this episode. Tell me what you think. Are you happy that Trump decided not to be part of the UN bullshit? I hope you're happy with that, because that is a good thing. We don't need any foreign entities meddling with our rights. The right of the people to keep and bear arms, as well as all the other rights in the Bill of Rights, those freedoms are not dependent on any foreign entity. They're dependent on the American people and our ability to keep the government from growing past its bounds, which is happening drastically. And then the other thing, which I still think is a big threat, is the prohibited persons, right? What we talked about before, these violent mobs that are going to, at least purporting to be wanting to use the Second Amendment to fight off the tyranny, the thing that they hate, even though what's taking place is lawful. Like, they're federal agents doing lawful detainment, and not extradition, but finding those that are here illegally and sending them back to their country. We have an illegal problem, right? And we see that they're milking the system dry. When you get these, all these legals here, they start poaching off the system, and they're driving the costs and the availability of things for citizens, ones that work hard, that contribute. It's making it harder for them to make ends meet. It all combines together. And again, I think that that is a definite possibility of a way of dismantling the Second Amendment by these violent crowds going crazy and committing terrible acts against both federal and local law enforcement and elected officials. That could end pretty badly, and it could end up, like I say, with the Insurrection Act and maybe worse. So tell me what you think. Talk me down out of the tree. I hope that we see a bright future, and I think we will. Right? I don't think everything's doom and gloom. I think things tend to work out for the better. We just got to ride the storm. A couple things I need you to do. Actually, do this. I haven't said this I probably have said it last time, but what fortifies the Second Amendment for the next generation is introducing it to the next generation. So make sure that as you go to the range, as you go shooting, as you volunteer in the community, whether it be for scouting or 4-H or whatever, like all those still exist, help proliferate or introduce the Second Amendment to the next generation. Invite people to go shooting. Invite your friends to go. It's okay. Make gun ownership normal again, because it is quite normal in the United States, but we're too scared to talk about it. Invite these people to go to the range with you and introduce them the proper way, the right way to see the Second Amendment, and not the crazies on the left that just want violence and fear. That's all they want. A couple other things I need you to do. I need you to stay safe. And I need you to stay free. And then I need you to stay range-minded. You guys are awesome. I love you. Till next time. Adios.
Did you mean to do that?
Yeah.